Meet Nell Harper Lee, born in Monroeville, Alabama, a place that shaped her forever. Her father's integrity, her mother's quiet presence, and her siblings' stories became the roots of her imagination. A restless, curious tomboy, Nell collected moments and truths, not just memories. Monroeville's dusty roads and small-town drama were her foundation. With her eyes wide open, Nell was ready to change the world with her words. Monroeville wasn't just Nell's home, it was her inspiration. Picture the heat, the gossip, the slow rhythm of a town where everyone knows your business. This was her playground and her classroom. She saw kindness and cruelty, the lines that divided people, and the courage it took to cross them. Nell was a voracious reader, devouring her father's library and escaping into new worlds. Books taught her that stories could take you anywhere and reveal hidden truths. She watched the town's rituals, church gatherings, courtroom dramas, front porch conversations. She learned the unspoken rules and the prejudices simmering beneath Southern hospitality. Nell wasn't judging, she was absorbing, learning the language and secrets of her people. A writer is a detective of the human heart. And Nell was already gathering clues. Her childhood wasn't just a prelude, it was the raw material for her masterpiece. The characters and moral questions she'd later write about were all around her. Macomb County wasn't fiction, it was memory shaped by art. Monroeville gave her authenticity and voice. She lived her story before she wrote it. That's why her words ring true. She didn't just imagine her world, she lived it, and that's where the best stories are born. In the heart of a small town, seen through the eyes of a keen observer. Nell was ready to turn life into literature. After high school, Nell tried to follow her father's path. She started at Huntingdon College, but the social scene wasn't for her. She was there for the books, not the debutante balls. At the University of Alabama, she studied law but found her true passion editing the campus humor magazine. She wrote sketches, stories, and satire, her real education. A summer at Oxford broadened her horizons, but the call to write grew louder. One semester from a law degree, she made a bold choice. She dropped out. She chose the unknown, chasing her dream instead of a safe career. In 1949, she moved to New York City with little more than ambition. She worked odd jobs, airline agent, bookstore clerk, living the classic struggling artist's life. But every spare moment, she wrote. New York gave her distance to see Monroeville clearly. Sometimes you have to leave home to understand it. She poured her Southern memories onto the page, shaping them into something new. The city was tough, but it sharpened her resolve. She wasn't just surviving, she was becoming a writer. The raw material from her childhood was finally taking shape. Nell was ready to tell her story. She had the courage to walk away from the expected path, and that made all the difference. In the heart of New York, she found her voice. The journey from Alabama to the big city was just the beginning. She was building the foundation for a masterpiece. Every struggle, every choice was leading her closer to her destiny. Nell Harper Lee was about to change American literature. All she needed was the right story, and she was almost ready to write it. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest stories. You can't tell Nell's story without Truman Capote. Childhood neighbors in Monroeville, they were both outsiders. She, the tomboy, he, flamboyant and sensitive. Their bond was deep, forged by a shared sense of being different. They became each other's first audience, dreaming up stories on an old typewriter. Truman inspired Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird, the curious story-spinning friend. Their friendship continued in New York, where Truman was already making waves. He guided her through the city. She kept him grounded. When Truman tackled in cold blood, he needed Nell by his side in Kansas. Her calm, empathetic nature opened doors his charisma couldn't. She gathered notes and details that became the backbone of his book. Some say she never got enough credit, but their creative alliance was powerful. Two brilliant minds from a small town, taking on the world together. Their friendship was complicated, beautiful, and deeply human. It shaped both their lives and their stories. While helping Truman, Nell was brewing her own story. It began as Go Set a Watchman, a collection of Monroeville memories. Her editor, Tay Hohoff, saw promise but urged her to rewrite from young Scout's perspective. That advice changed everything. Nell spent 2.5 years rewriting. Friends Michael and Joy Brown gifted her a year's salary, freeing her to write full-time. She poured her observations, love for home, and sense of justice into the book. Atticus Finch, inspired by her father, became a hero of quiet integrity. She tackled big themes: racial injustice, class, courage, compassion. It was painstaking work, but she was patient. On July 11, 1960, To Kill a Mockingbird was published. Nell hoped for a quiet release, never expecting what would come next. She just wanted to tell a true story. Instead, she gave the world a masterpiece. The Mockingbird was ready to sing. Her childhood, her town, her family, all transformed into art. She had found her voice, and it resonated everywhere. Sometimes the hardest work leads to the most beautiful results. Nell's masterpiece was finally born. To Kill a Mockingbird wasn't just a hit, it was a phenomenon. Pulitzer Prize, bestseller lists, translations, and a classic film adaptation. Gregory Peck's Atticus Finch became iconic, and he and Nell became friends. The world fell in love with her story and its message of courage and humanity. But fame wasn't for Nell. She was a writer, not a celebrity. The spotlight felt overwhelming. People wanted more books, more answers. The pressure was immense, lightning in a bottle, and everyone wanted a repeat. So she made a brave choice. She retreated from public life. No more interviews, no more appearances. She let her book speak for itself. Many didn't understand why she stopped, but for Nell, it was about self-preservation. She divided her time between New York and Monroeville, living simply and quietly. She wasn't a recluse. She just valued her privacy. She lived on her own terms, surrounded by trusted friends and her sister Alice. Nell had given the world a gift and then reclaimed her life. It was a quiet, dignified refusal to play the fame game. She chose authenticity over celebrity. In a world that shouts, her silence was powerful. She showed that you don't have to be everywhere to make an impact. Sometimes, the greatest strength is knowing when to step back. Nell's retreat was as courageous as her writing. She protected her story and herself. The world kept reading and she kept living. That's the mark of a true artist. For decades, Harper Lee lived quietly, but her life was far from empty. In Monroeville, she shared a home with her sister Alice, who fiercely protected her privacy. Nell stayed engaged with the world, reading, writing letters, and occasionally publishing essays. She lived her life, not for an audience, but for herself. The people of Monroeville saw her as Nell, not a celebrity. She went to church, had breakfast at McDonald's, and lived simply. She resisted the myth built around her, never letting her book define her. Her long silence only added to her mystique. People speculated, but the truth was simple. She was content. She had told the story in her heart and didn't need to say more. In a world obsessed with publicity, her quiet life was almost radical. Sometimes the most profound stories are lived, not told. Nell's greatest lesson: a meaningful life doesn't have to be a public one. In 2015, the world was stunned. Another Harper Lee novel was coming. Go Set a Watchman, her original manuscript, was discovered and published. The announcement sparked excitement and controversy. Nell, in her late 80s and frail, was at the center of a public debate about her consent. Officials said she approved, but questions lingered. The book shocked readers. Atticus Finch was now a flawed, aging segregationist. It forced a national conversation about memory, idealism, and uncomfortable truths. Watchmen wasn't Mockingbird. It was rougher, more didactic, but a fascinating look at her process. It showed how editing and hard work transformed a draft into a classic. The publication was a strange, controversial final chapter. It reminded us that stories and people are complicated. Even in her last act, Nell challenged us to think deeper. One last lesson from Monroeville's quiet storyteller. Nell Harper Lee passed away in 2016 at 89 in her beloved Monroeville. Her legacy isn't just in her books, it's in the hearts of millions. She taught us to see the world with empathy and courage. To Kill a Mockingbird has sold over 40 million copies and is always in print. It shapes moral compasses, asking timeless questions about justice and compassion. Her life was a lesson in integrity and humility. She showed you don't need fame to make a difference, just honesty and heart. She let her work speak, and it still does. Her story lives on in classrooms, theaters, and every reader's heart. A life well lived, a story well told. That's a legacy that lasts. Thanks for joining this journey through her life. If you love stories about living thoughtfully, subscribe to NutreyLife. Keep on living, and keep telling your story, because sometimes one voice can change the world. Just ask Nell Harper Lee.